Last week, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, issued an arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, as well as his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and also Ibrahim Al-Masri, who is a top Hamas leader. Now, especially, of course, the arrest warrant against Netanyahu has sent shockwaves through the Western world. Some Western leaders seem to be in a state of panic. Now, interestingly, everything surrounding this arrest warrant has once again exposed the ICC as an organization with very limited powers. Sometimes it seems completely ceremonial, and very often it reeks of being very biased. Now, the ICC has been established in 2002 with the purpose of prosecuting individuals for the international crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Now, in and of itself, that sounds like a pretty good idea, doesn't it? However, the ICC, as it has existed, has been dealing with some controversy and some backlash. First of all, since the beginning of the International Criminal Court in 2002, for a very long time, at least until 2016, literally all cases that the ICC had been investigating were in African countries, and only African individuals were being targeted. Now, very understandably, the ICC was accused of being very biased, racist even, and being used as a tool for Western imperialism, only going after small, weak states, while at the same time ignoring crimes committed by more powerful, primarily Western states. Now, second of all, there's the matter of jurisdiction. Now, it kinda makes sense that if your country signs up to the ICC, that the ICC then has jurisdiction within your country. That kinda makes sense. Even that is a little bit questionable because, of course, hypothetically, small, weaker states can be pressured into signing up. But in principle, it kinda makes sense, right? But now, what if your country hasn't signed up to the ICC? What if it doesn't subscribe to it? What then? Now, according to the ICC itself, if you commit crimes that are relevant for the ICC, on the territory of a state that is a member of the International Criminal Court, or against individuals from a member state, then the ICC has jurisdiction to investigate, possibly arrest and prosecute you, even if you are from a non-member state. So that's according to the ICC itself. Now, not everyone agrees with this. One party that doesn't agree with this happens to be the United States of America, which of course shouldn't be very surprising. I mean, let's say for the last 7 decades, can you guess which country has been involved in more military operations than any other country in the world? Not even close. Can you guess? The strategy that the US seems to have adopted to try to keep its status in the world to a very large degree is based on the idea that the US needs to assert military dominance. It even seems like the entire political class in the US has been marinating in this philosophy to such a degree that they've even made a business model out of it. Now, first of all, if you're involved in more military activity than any other country, then statistically you might also be involved in more crimes, or at least be accused of more crimes than others. And second of all, this strategy has been so important to the US that it seems like they believe that they cannot afford to let their citizens be arrested and tried by the ICC, because that of course would potentially diminish their military grip on the world considerably. So of course the US hasn't signed up to the ICC. They don't recognize the ICC, and in fact, in the same year that the ICC was established, they even passed a law that, quote, gives the president power to use all means necessary and appropriate to bring about the release of any US or allied personnel being detained or imprisoned by, on behalf of, or at the request of the International Criminal Court. So realistically speaking, the ICC is not going to target Americans, and that makes the ICC fundamentally unfair. So they are going to target individuals from small, weaker nations, but they're not going to touch any Americans. Now, interestingly, in 2023, the ICC issued an arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. So you could say, see, they're not only going after small, weak nations, they're even targeting the president of the Russian Federation. Well, true, but there is one very important difference between Russia and, for example, the United States. Russia, by many, is considered to be an enemy of the West. The United States is the West. Now, whether you believe that the ICC has issued this arrest warrant in good faith or not, it has fed the belief that many people have held that the ICC only targets enemies of the West. Now, just like the United States, Russia is not a member of the ICC. They don't subscribe to the International Criminal Court. So the question is, does the ICC have the jurisdiction to go after Russians and even the president of the Russian Federation? Now, the ICC says, well, these are our rules, so of course we have the right to do this. But on the other hand, Russia says, hold on, we haven't signed on to anything, or at least at the moment we're not a member, so please stay away from us. Don't come around here with all that nonsense. So who's right? Well, that's the funny thing about international law. It very often comes down to who is most powerful. Now, similarly to the United States, Russia has a very, very powerful military. Maybe not quite as powerful as the US, or at least internationally speaking, but very, very powerful indeed. So is there anyone that really believes that any country, any member of the ICC would be willing to actually arrest the president of the Russian Federation and with that risk immediately being at war with Russia? Really? I think that's very unlikely. But then the question is, if you know that Vladimir Putin is probably never ever going to be arrested, then why the arrest warrant? It seems almost completely ceremonial and only about optics. And that once again has exposed the ICC as a very powerless institution. And then there is the arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, interestingly, of course, Israel is very much part of the West. So what does that mean? Does that mean that now the ICC does go after Western countries? Or could it be that Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing something so horrific that the ICC had no other choice? I don't know. Anyway, Western leaders seem to be completely in shock, seemingly because now it's one of their own. And that also reflected in the response by some Western leaders. For example, take a look at this article from Deutsche Welle. It says, would Netanyahu be arrested in Germany? Germany says it is examining its possible response to the ICC arrest warrant against Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Germany supports the ICC, but is also committed to its special relationship to Israel. Well, that's about the biggest nonsense I've ever heard. I mean, that's like a police officer officially stating, this man is wanted for murder. I'm supposed to arrest him, but I have a special relationship with him, so I'm not sure if I should do it. Remember, Germany has been a member of the ICC since the very beginning. They've always supported every decision that the ICC has made. Only now that the arrest warrant is for one of their own, now all of a sudden they have to examine their possible response. It's extreme hypocrisy. Now also the French have been bending over backwards to try to justify not having to arrest Netanyahu. And this is what they came up with. France says Netanyahu has immunity from ICC arrest warrants. Now, to be clear, Israel, just like Russia, for example, is not a member of the ICC. But because it is Netanyahu, now all of a sudden that would mean that he has immunity. So they're basically stepping on the decision by the ICC and they're simply completely ignoring it. And then, of course, there is the United States.
So let me just say more broadly that we fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter. You've heard us say this before. In coordination with partners, including Israel, we are discussing certainly those next steps, what that's going to look like. And to your question about sanctions, that's basically kind of just answered it in that last part of what I said. We're in consultation with our partners and also which include Israel about our next steps.
Now, very unsurprisingly, of course, the White House rejects these arrest warrants. But apparently they're even considering taking further steps. Now, what might these steps entail? Well, let's take a listen to the always very subtle, always very nuanced Lindsey Graham.
What will I do? If you are going to help the ICC as a nation enforce their arrest warrant against Bibi and Gallant, the former defense minister, I will put sanctions on you as a nation. You're going to have to pick the rogue ICC versus America. I'm working with Tom Cotton to have legislation passed as soon as we can to sanction any country that aids and abets the arrest of any politician in Israel. So to any ally, Canada, Britain, Germany, France, if you try to help the ICC, we're going to sanction you. If you help the ICC, we're going to crush your economy.
So let me get this straight. So not only does the United States not recognize the ICC, they're even considering taking steps against it that, according to Lindsey Graham, could mean sanctioning other countries, including members of the ICC, for cooperating with the ICC. So we have a total collapse of support by countries like Germany and France and some others, which, by the way, kind of seems to affirm that only non-Western individuals are allowed to be targeted. And on top of that, we have the enormous pressure from the United States. Now tell me this, what else could this mean than that the International Criminal Court in The Hague is done?